Hi, this is Ursula, and you're listening to Catholic versus Other.
So tell the listeners, if you would, a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you believe, and how you came to believe it.
Who I am. It's an interesting question. I am the product, I think, of my parents and their parents and their parents and everything that all of those generations experienced, all of the traumas, all of the good things. I came to that realization basically yesterday after doing a Reiki session where I was able to see suffering that members of my family experienced as well as my own previous lives that I had lived. I believe in, I guess if I had to find a closest religion to describe it to, maybe it would be Buddhism. So I guess I believe in some form of reincarnation and suffering every time you come back until you figure out what it is, what trauma it is that has been passed down through your family. And once you figure that out and you're able to work through it and not be angry and only feel love and be grateful, then you're able to come back and be eternally happy. Or if you were Catholic, I guess you would say you would be able to go to heaven.
Prior to yesterday, how would you have described yourself? If you're able to talk me through a little bit from childhood up until yesterday, and then what happened yesterday and sort of till today.
Childhood, I'd say I didn't believe in anything, per se. I guess you'd say I was an atheist. I wasn't baptized. I wasn't raised with any type of religion in my life. But both my mother and my father are quite Buddhist leaning. So my mother studied religion at Concordia University, and she was very drawn to Jainism. That's something that she really identified, which I think has something to do with nature, if I'm not mistaken. And my dad, I would say, also has Buddhist beliefs, but my dad is a very confused person, so hard to pin down exactly what he believes.
But when you were growing up, did you encounter this notion that people are talking about God and stuff like that?
Nobody talked about God around me. Nobody talked about God at all in my life. We did not go to church. God was never mentioned. We didn't pray. There was no saying grace before meals or any of this type of thing.
Have you ever prayed?
3 to 4 years ago, I started praying.
What prompted that?
I was not living here in Montreal, so I was away from my family. I was away from my friends. I felt very isolated and very scared and very unhappy. And I was with somebody who was not nice to me. And there was a lot of anger in the house, and I felt very poisoned by anger. It started with insomnia. It didn't start as like an actual prayer to God. It started more as this type of mantra thing where I would just say, everything is going to be okay. Everything is going to be okay. Everything is going to be okay. And I would say that over hundreds to thousands of times until I fell asleep, which sometimes I wouldn't sleep at all the whole night. And from there, it progressed to, dear God, I need your help. Please help me. I know you can help me. I want to be a better person. And to then reaching out to some of my friends who I knew were religious. I had one good friend who is quite religious, and she's Spanish, and she went to a Spanish church in Montreal. And it was a very joyous church. There was a lot of music, and it wasn't like what I pictured church would be. And it was a really nice experience. So after we went to that church, I asked if we could go to St. Joseph's Oratory just because I don't speak Spanish. So even though I really enjoyed the service, I had no actual idea of what was being said because it was not in a language I understood. But I still felt definitely the spirit and the love that was in the church. I went to St. Joseph's a couple of times, maybe once or twice. And one of the times that I was there, I don't know if it was the time that we saw each other, but a woman was walking around with a petition. She was dressed very oddly. She was sort of dressed like out of the 40s or 50s, and she was walking around with a petition about abortion. And I just thought, I don't think that's the place to be doing that in a church. And it really turned me off. And so I never went back to St. Joseph's after that. I've also in the past gone to Jehovah's Witness church while I was living in Virginia. Again, I was, I guess, away from the family. I was not living in a bad situation though. I was living in a good situation, but still away from people I know and just maybe even out of boredom or having nothing to do. I decided to try out the Jehovah's Witness, I don't know what they call themselves. Temple, yeah. That was interesting. Met a lot of really nice people. Everybody was very friendly. Oh, and also when I was in the States, I had an amazing experience of going to a Black Baptist church in Virginia, where me and my husband at the time were the only white people in church. Mm-hmm. And as soon as it started, the sermon, the pastor, like sort of identified us as like, oh, clearly these are two new people here. And everybody was just so happy and welcoming and clapping, and I mean, just like the hallelujah is erupting all over the place, and you can just feel like all of the love and all of the joy. So that was an amazing experience. So I think because I didn't have any religion in my life growing up, I think I've always been looking for something to believe in, and I've always been terrified of dying. Growing up, I always was under the impression that I would die by drowning by the age of 35. This was just a feeling I had. How
old are you now, if you don't mind asking?
I'm 42 in August.
Okay,
I'm
so
41,
you survived.
so I survived. But now I know why I had that thought. Now I know why that was something I thought about. This is something I realized yesterday during this thing that I guess we'll talk about.
Sure, yeah, you can talk about it now. You had a session or something?
I had a Reiki session. Basically, I've been very sick my whole life. It started at the age of probably around 10 or 12 years old, 13 years old. Before that, I had always been a fairly healthy kid. And then I just, all of a sudden, seemingly overnight, got very unhealthy. So I was constantly sick. I threw up all the time. I had a lot of stomach problems, a lot of recurring infections. As I got older, it turned into a lot of other health problems. I was at the point where I was seeing in the past year or two, I'd say 2 to 3 doctors a week, spending a lot of time at St. Mary's Hospital, had a few surgeries, and my condition was undiagnosed. But they kept seeing an elevated white T cell count, which means that you have an infection that your body is fighting. But they could never identify the infection. So there was a sign that I was fighting an infection, but then when they would do other tests, it would say there is no infection. And so many times I went to hospitals, I went to doctors, feeling like I was on the brink of death, and I would get told, you're fine, there's nothing wrong with you, go home. You're paranoid, take some anxiety pills, completely disregarded. Until about, a couple of months ago when the symptoms started getting quite a bit worse, I started having a lot of neurological symptoms. So having problems remembering my words. I'm a writer. I couldn't write. I would mix up my letters. I'd mix up my words. I would try to write something and I wouldn't be able to do it. It was like there was a block. And I also started having a lot of heart problems, heart palpitations, chest pain, lung pain, and this type of thing. And I, at one point, even started having problems walking. I felt very dizzy, and I didn't know what was going on. I had no idea what was going on. Around the same time, my grandmother passed away. She had been sick her whole life also. She went through the Second World War. She went through a lot of trauma in her life, as did my grandfather. And she never spoke about anything. She kept everything inside of her. And she had also, like me, recurring infections, and she was always coughing, which is one of the things that has been a problem for me, a lot of coughing. And people who know me would know that this is not what my voice actually sounds like. Like, I'm quite congested right now. And so my grandmother passed away. She died of pneumonia. When she died, they flipped her over in bed. She was in a lot of pain. She was fidgeting a lot. She was very troubled, and she hadn't slept in 3 days, and she was terrified to close her eyes. She was terrified of dying. She didn't want to die. But I remember her telling me 10 years before not to be afraid of dying. And I said to her, like, why aren't you afraid of dying? And she said to me, well, it's just like a tree. When a tree dies, or when the leaves fall off the tree, it dries up, it falls into the ground, and then it decomposes and it goes into the earth. And then that becomes the nutrients for new things to grow, like other flowers and other shrubs and other plants. And she said, that's why I'm not afraid of dying, that I know that me dying will cause a rebirth in a way of something else. And so that gave me a little bit of comfort when she told me that. That's something I would think about. And then when she died, I sort of felt like she became my angel. So I started praying to her specifically. I would pray to God, but I would also pray to her. And then I started praying to my grandfather also. I was asking them basically for help. I was asking them to help heal me. I prayed a lot for my health. I started looking up prayers online that are specifically for health. Like, I guess you'd call them Catholic prayers, Christian prayers. And so I started just reading them off my phone and saying them out loud. And I moved to an apartment that's located right in front of a church in Montreal, St. Michael's Church, which is a Polish church. And so when I sit and work all day, because I work from home, I look out at the church all day. So there's the church, I see the cross, I see the steeple, and then I see a big, huge tree. And so that's what I look out to every day now. And after being sick for all these years, this week, I went to the doctor and I was told that I have Lyme disease. So basically, Lyme disease is caused by being bit by a tick. It's sort of like lupus and a lot of other conditions where there's a whole host of symptoms. Like, if you look at the list of symptoms, it's just insane because it's neurological symptoms, it's heart symptoms, it could be anything. It's just the symptoms are so wide, which is why it goes so undiagnosed, especially in women. And I think women are very disregarded in society, but also by the medical profession. I think when women go see a doctor, they're told, you're paranoid, here, take an anxiety pill. And when men go see a doctor, they're told, oh, wow, you're a man and you came to a doctor, so you must be really sick. I'm going to try and figure out what's wrong with you. And that's been my experience in my 30 years of going to doctors. So getting this diagnosis for me was like such a validation, A, that I wasn't crazy, B, that I was actually sick. And then I started reading about Lyme, and I joined a Lyme support group on Facebook, and all of a sudden, it's like there was a miracle, I would say, where all of these people in my life contacted me to tell me things. It's like I was getting messages from God. And then I went for this Reiki session, and during the session, I saw the trauma that I lived. I actually saw it. I saw my childhood. So I saw what happened to me. And then I also saw different past lives that I had had. And I realized, A, that my fear of drowning was because of a past life where I drowned. And that all of the pain I had in my body. So let's say one of the pains that I have is extreme pain around my wrists, around my knees, and around my ankles, and around my neck. And that's because in a past life, I was tied up to something in those places and then drowned. During the Reiki session, the practitioner put her hands over my ears. And when she took her hands off, I heard a popping noise in both ears and about 5 tablespoons of water poured out of each ear. So that wasn't imagined. That's something that I saw, she saw, and ended up on my shirt and the bed that I was lying on. So that's not something that's like, nobody could have denied that it happened.
Yeah. We could just deny the source and...
people could argue whatever. What caused it. But definitely, physically, water came out of my ears.
Yeah. I just want to say for the record, as a Catholic, that I'm very wary of any spirituality and any sort of mystical stuff. And I'm cautious even of Catholic mysticism, okay? Never mind wacky and weird New Age stuff.
Yeah.
And I firmly believe that there's no such thing as reincarnation. If there is reincarnation, then Christianity is a false religion. They're mutually exclusive, so they can't both be true. That's just my point of view. I just want to make sure that I put that out there. But what prompted you to go to do a Reiki session?
Reading a lot on this support group of people who've been doing antibiotic treatment for weeks and months and years and not getting healthy, not getting better.
And what does the word mean, actually?
So Reiki, the actual definition of Reiki, it's made up of 2 words in Japanese. Rei, which means God's wisdom or the higher power, and Ki, which means life force energy.
It's a sort of channeling of healing energy.
Exactly. That's exactly what it is. It's a channeling of healing energy. And so before the session started, I had done Reiki once before, or something similar, 5 or 6 years ago. But I didn't know at that time that I had Lyme. I hadn't made a couple of other realizations in my life. I hadn't been praying yet. I was still very angry, very sick, blaming everyone, just fed up with life, basically. And someone tried to do a sort of energy healing session on me. And during the session, because you have your eyes closed when you're doing it, I just heard the woman go, and she sort of tapped me on the shoulder and she said, I can't do this. She said, there's a really, really dark force inside of you. And it just came and I saw it and it scared me and I can't do this.
It's intense.
Yeah.
Did that freak you out?
It did, but I wasn't surprised. And I've always felt like there was something foreign inside of me that didn't belong there.
I certainly can relate. I mean, I come from a family with lots of suicide, lots of depression, lots of dark stuff. But my concern is that you sort of discovered prayer and you were reaching out to God intuitively, and I think that's a good thing. And then I feel now like you've been co-opted into something that's ungodly, because we're talking about reincarnation and Reiki, which I consider demonic. What role would my God play in that?
I honestly believe that if you look at Buddhism, if you look at Muslim religion, if you look at Catholicism, I think in the end, it's all the same thing. And I think the most important thing about all of those things is love. And I think as long as a person believes in love, then they're being godly and they're respecting their higher self and they're respecting other people's higher selves. If you don't do anything out of anger, if you don't do anything out of anything else other than gratefulness and love, then I think whether you call it being Muslim or whether you call it being Catholic, I think it's all the same thing. So whether it's reincarnation or heaven, I think, but it's similar to Buddhism, because I've heard in Buddhism this like samsara and the wheel in life, and you come back and there's suffering every time until basically, I think you live with compassion and love, and then there's no more suffering. And to me, once you've dealt with your own trauma, the trauma of your family, and you're working with the people around, not working with, but you're helping the people around you be their highest selves as well. Everybody is trying to achieve their highest selves, their highest power, to live with love, to live with gratitude. And I feel like the Reiki session sort of helped me figure out what my mission in life is supposed to be.
So do you plan on doing more sessions with that same person or with another practitioner?
Definitely, I plan on doing more sessions with her. I'm actually having an appointment with her next week to deal with the blockages from past lives. But I also plan on doing other things as well, because I've basically decided that I'm not going to be doing any antibiotics. I took my last antibiotic this morning and I'm not going to be doing any more, even though I know that means I'm going to get very sick. So I'm starting a little pink eye in this eye right now. I don't know if you can tell, but, and my voice and my heart is beating like probably about 150 beats a minute. So all of my symptoms are going to come out. That's the thing too. When I left that session yesterday, I walked in there feeling like, well, I was already feeling better because I'd already had some sort of epiphanies or whatever you want to call them. But I walked out of there feeling like a reborn person, like a new person, like 10,000 years of pounds of weights had been removed off of me. And like I could actually see clearly for the first time in a long time. And every interaction that I've had with people since then has been completely different. Okay. So now when I see people, instead of having negative thoughts or thinking, oh, them again, they're talking about this, and I don't see it that way. Okay. I see things totally differently now.
Fresh.
Yeah, and all positive, all from a good point of view.
I don't know how much you know or about.
I have a question for you, actually. I'd like to learn about Michael, what is it?
Archangel.
Yeah, I would like to learn about him because I was told by my Reiki master that I should be praying to him.
Oh, that's nice.
So I find it interesting that she said to me, he is the person who you should be praying to.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you, because I know you're very knowledgeable.
Yeah.
If you could tell me a little bit about him.
Satan was a big, glorious, the most beautiful angel, and he fell from grace. And Michael was a small, low-ranked angel that stood with God. And so Michael is responsible for defeating Satan in a certain sense. He casts Satan into hell. The St. Michael prayer, I pray it every day, and I recommend it to you too.
The incense that she was burning in the room during the session said Archangel Michael on it. She's like, well, you obviously have a strong connection to him, so that's who you should be praying to. She recommends a lot of prayer. She recommends a lot of praying. She said, you have to get down on your knees and pray.
That's nice.
Yeah.
That's good.
And that's something I did actually of my own 2 days ago, before the Reiki session. When I found out I had Lyme, I literally dropped to my knees and thanked God for Lyme disease. Like, thank you for Lyme disease.
Because of what it gives you as an opportunity to heal. To
heal and to be full of love instead of full of hate.
Okay. I did speak to one Reiki practitioner, and she said that there are demons involved. But are you troubled in your dreams by dark forces, or?
I was. I had I have a few recurring dreams that were very, very violent in nature. Very horrible.
Ooh.
But now I know I had them because they were keys and signs of where the trauma happened in my life.
Mm. You know, I'm a convert to Catholicism, and I come from generational trauma, and I haven't personally experienced anything.
That's what I thought. I didn't think I had experienced anything either.
Okay. Yeah.
What I saw yesterday was something I wasn't aware of. It was a suppressed memory.
Even from this life?
Yes.
Yeah, I also believe that false memories, you can have false memories, and we can't necessarily know what's real and what's not. I wouldn't necessarily trust a vivid image from my childhood. But having said that, maybe, who knows, maybe I experienced some trauma in this life. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's possible. My memory's not that good anyway.
Yeah.
And I do...
Yeah, that's a symptom of Lyme disease.
Is it?
Yeah. I'd be interested in showing you the symptoms and seeing how many you have.
Is the diagnostic a physical test, or is it a checklist of symptoms?
It's, there's a Lyme test that you can do. It's literally a Lyme test, but it's very inaccurate. It's better in the States and it's better in Europe. The test that's used in Canada is not a very good test.
Okay.
But the way I was diagnosed with it was basically through the immunoclinic at the Montreal General Hospital. So they took a lot of blood out of my body and they ran all the tests. They looked at T cell counts and ANA levels and all this type of thing. And then they injected me with pneumonia vaccine. And then 6 weeks later, I went back and they did tests again. And then by looking at how my blood and cells and everything had reacted, they were able to positively diagnose me with Lyme disease.
Wow.
Like, not like based on symptoms, based on
science.
Yeah. And Lyme disease, for people who don't know, is you get it bitten by a tick.
That's the only way?
That's the only way you can get Lyme disease.
Do you remember the tick?
I've been bit by more than one tick. The first one actually happened in one of the places where I had one of my recurring dreams about, which was my country house, one of my favorite places to go as a childhood.
Uh-huh.
And, but I always had a recurring dream about horrible, horrible things happening there. Tsunamis, wars, extreme violence to the extreme, where I would wake up and just be like, how could I be having these dreams about this place that I love so much, that my grandfather built with his own hands, and that my whole family would go to together, and we would all eat together and sit together it was like the most beautiful memories from my childhood. And I didn't understand how I could have this memory of it that was or this dream. Why this dream? But that was where I was bitten by a tick. I want to find out a lot more about Lyme disease. I want to find out a lot more about Buddhism. I want to find out a lot more about the Archangel Michael. I want to find out a lot more about homelessness and First Nations issues. And I have a lot of learning to do, because I've spent a lot of my life not being very productive or useful. And so I have a lot of catching up to do.
Just don't overdo it.
Yeah, I have to take care of myself too. That's the thing too. When you have Lyme disease, you really have to take care of yourself because you're quite fragile. So taking care of yourself and taking care of others.
So at the end of my interviews, I usually ask my guests just to speak directly to the audience.
Yeah.
Just to wrap things up, what would you say to anyone that's listening?
I would say to anyone who's listening, if you have a fear in your life, look at what that fear is, and instead of being afraid, be grateful. And whenever you feel angry or you feel sad or you feel despair, desperation, instead try to feel love. And everything that you do it out of compassion and empathy, and try to be the best person and the highest form of yourself that you could be at all times. And if there's people in your life who you think take away from that, then maybe you shouldn't be hanging around them too much, because you have to protect yourself a little bit too.
If you like your worldview, if you think it's swell, if you got some questions, ask me and I'll tell. All you got to do is ask. All you got to do is